and they're told the lie of Satan, and they believe it. Now, why is this being spread? Well, Satan is behind it, and his goal is to make sure that we're inoculated against the gospel. If you actually believe that you yourself are the light of the world, why would you come to Jesus who claims that he's the light of the world? You have nowhere else to go. You already have everything you need. Tolle, The New Earth, page 8, he brings in this concept of Maya from Eastern religion. Certain teachings, he says, at the heart of Hinduism perhaps come closest to seeing this dysfunction as a form of collective mental illness. They call it Maya, the veil of delusion. Well, what does that mean? Well, according to Pantheism, all categories are actually illusion. God somehow lost consciousness of his own existence, was enfolded into the creation, and has to go through a spiritual evolution to become unfolded. All right? And so we are living in the illusion, they say, that all these things we see and everything that we do, and our wife and our kids and our car and our house and our job, it's all an illusion. The reality should be that we just become awakened, become conscious to what they call presence, which is another word for deity, and we will get away from Maya, the veil of delusion. So this is just simply Eastern pantheism repackaged for Oprah's watchers. Here's what else he says. Recognize the ego for what it is, a collective dysfunction, the insanity of the human mind. Then he talks about Jesus. Now he's quoting Jesus. It was amazing to me. He quotes Jesus more than he quotes Buddha, because he wasn't conscript Jesus to teach his Eastern religion. When Jesus said, "Deny thyself," what he meant, says Tolle, was negate and undo the illusion of the self. Remember, Maya is illusion. If the self, ego, were truly who I am, it would be absurd to deny it. Page 79. Now listen, Jesus didn't mean that you don't really exist, so quit thinking like you are really a human being. Jesus meant quit living for self and start living for God on his terms. That's a totally different concept than denying that you actually exist as an individual human being with a distinct identity. Tolle says anything you would identify with as being you, your date of birth, your parents, your schooling, your experiences, your job, all of the things that you might look at and say, this constitutes me as a distinct and unique human being, all of that is bad. If you start thinking about that, you'll never become conscious. Forget self, and even thoughts are bad. You have to get to thoughtlessness to become conscious. Now, when it talks about the dysfunction of the human mind, he's actually talking about this dysfunction in the mind of God. See, in Tantric Buddhism, the idea is that God became insane and lost consciousness and has to regain it. So really, who's got the insanity problem in this religion is God. Now, why would anybody believe that God's insane? Because they believe Eastern religion. Why do they believe Eastern religion? Because they don't believe the gospel. Because they don't believe the Bible, because they don't listen to what God said, because they don't want the truth, so they get the lie as a replacement. Page 292, Tolle says this consciousness becoming unconscious of itself could be described as the descent of the divine into matter. That's what they call enfolding, with an E-N, enfolding, the descent of the divine into matter. At that stage in the evolution of the universe, the entire outgoing movement takes place in that dreamlike state. So God got enfolded into matter, lost consciousness of his own existence, and has to evolve out of that state. Has to evolve. This is what spiritual evolution means. What we can't figure out is why people don't see this for what it is. What we can't figure out is why the church is asleep. Okay? Warren said to me, here we have our Christian apologists going around the country doing seminars about secular humanism and biological evolution, and we don't have anybody talking about spiritual evolution. Biological evolution, they just take as for granted, and now they use that as a proof of spiritual evolution. The problem, dear ones, is mysticism and pagan spirituality. Secular humanism was a 50-year-ago problem. And the church is fighting battles from 50 years ago, and not anybody standing up to fight today's battle. Why? Who's going to fight this battle? Are we going to sit on our hands, keep our pulpits shut up, and allow our friends and relatives, nieces and nephews, cousins and uncles, co-workers, to go to hell because we don't want to stand up against what's going on in the world that we're living in? Wake up, America. Spiritual evolution is the new doctrine. Biological evolution is just, they're bored about that. Okay, so what? This is what they're talking about. So God has to evolve. The evolution of the universe is the evolving of God out of the matter from which he got stuck in. Wisdom from the East, page 242. Listen to this one. And if this makes sense to you, I feel very sorry for you. Okay. You can add 1,000 more definitions, thoughts of who you are, and by doing so will certainly increase the complexity of the experience of yourself. But in this way, you will never end up with the subject, the experiencer, who is prior to all experience, but without whom there can be no experience. Who is the experiencer? You are. And who are you? Consciousness. And what is consciousness? That question cannot be answered. Oh, I'm conscious. Or am I? Maybe I'm thinking, and that would be bad. Are you conscious or are you thinking? I'm not sure. See, the thing that's so absurd about this is that it's written in a book. Okay, if thoughts are the problem that make us think that we're real, that we have actual identities and unconscious of our own deity, then a guy writes a book and you have to use human language, human reason, human rationality, and human thoughts to understand the book and get categories in your mind to know what the guy's talking about. But once you've got the categories and the knowledge and the understanding of what he said, you just got further away from deity. It's self-defeating. It's self-referential. It makes absolutely no sense. When I was in seminary, I heard similar ideas. There's from this postmodern perspective. They're just self-defeating. A guy writes a book using words, using human language, using the norms of that language, English as in this case, and he writes the book to prove that you can't know the meaning of a book. What about spiritual evolution, as I was warning you here a moment ago? What is spiritual evolution? Well, let's read about it. Fulfilling your primary purpose is laying the foundation for a new reality, a new earth. Once that foundation is there, your external purpose becomes charged with spiritual power because your aims and intention will be one with the evolutionary impulse of the universe. This afternoon, I'm going to show you and prove to you that the emergent church teaches the same concept of spiritual evolution that this pantheistic Buddhist type person does here. You may think, well, only total pagans would ever believe this. No, it's actually being taught in churches. And I'm going to prove that to you. So we have spiritual evolution, God becoming conscious of his own existence. And he has to do that through us. We become the consciousness of the universe if we get along with this program. Look at this, 242, Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. But by the way, the concept of the New Earth he pulls out of the Bible. He quotes the Bible. Unbelievable. The subject, says Tolle, the I, the knower, me, without which nothing could be known, perceived, thought, or felt, must remain forever unknowable. Huh? This is because the I has no form. I don't really exist. And so if I know myself to be me, even a philosopher that says, I think, therefore I am, he's deceived. He didn't realize that he's just pure consciousness. And he hasn't awakened. He's still asleep. We are importing ideas, dear ones, ideas that have already destroyed numbers of cultures. No scientific advances have ever happened in a culture where this is believed. Why? Why is there no science? Because if everything's an illusion, there's no reason to identify categories. And if you can't identify a category, you can't tell sodium from iron. You cannot tell gold from lead. You can't make a car. You can't do anything because everything's an illusion. You have no reason to try to do anything besides sit in the lotus position in some corner trying to become conscious of your deity. All this other activity is a distraction from becoming conscious. If an entire society believes that, they will become totally incapacitated. They will become impoverished. They will be unable to function in the real world that God put them in. And the only reason the United States of America isn't in that condition now is that for over 200 years we had a Judeo-Christian worldview that came from the Bible. If we allow Oprah and friends, Oprah is leeching off of what her view could never create. If everybody believed what her guest is saying and what she's promoting, there wouldn't be no such thing as a TV camera to put her on TV. Because the camera is an illusion. It's Maya. Doesn't exist. Why watch Oprah? It's getting your mind off of your own deity. Thank you. Well, a little more of this, and we got to move on to a new heretic here. Awakening is a shift in consciousness in which thinking and awareness separate. Awareness takes over from thinking. See, always thinking's the problem. Awareness, says Tolle, is conscious connection with universal intelligence. Another word for it is presence. So notice the capital P. That means deity. Consciousness without thought. Consciousness without thought. You know what else this is besides an attack against the Bible, an attack against God, an attack against the gospel, an attack against Western civilization, an attack against rationality? It's an attack against the biblical idea that human beings were created in the image of God. Yes, because we believe they were created in God's image, we believe rationality is valid. We believe our thoughts are what God allows us to be able to have to interact with the world He put us in. He allowed Adam, before the fall, to name the animals. Adam is rational. Adam can distinguish, being created in God's image, between a giraffe and a billy goat. That's categories. The categories aren't an illusion. They're real. God gave us rationality to be able to function with categories, and functioning with categories is how we survive. When I wrote about this in my book, I pointed out that without these basic foundations, of human rationality, we would not be able to distinguish between food and poison. Because we just wouldn't be able to. We need to be rational. We don't have an instinct like animals where we can go out in the woods and eat whatever we feel like eating and know that it won't be poison. We don't have that. We have to learn. We have to know. This is an attack against human beings created in the image of God. Again, one more Tolle, then we'll move on. We can never understand this higher order through thinking about it. Because whatever we think about is content. Whereas the higher order emanates from the formless realm of consciousness, from universal intelligence. So quit thinking about things and just become conscious. You know what makes this even reasonable, possible, attractive, interesting? Because on the surface, it looks like it would not be anything anybody would ever want to join up for. There's more in this world than just God as far as spirituality is concerned. There's a real Satan, and there are real demons, and real principalities and powers, and these powers are capable of giving people a religious experience.